Have you ever met someone who's 32 years old, but still calls their mom because they don't know how to book a doctor's appointment? Or someone who spends $3,000 building the ultimate gaming setup, but keeps saying they can't afford to move out? Or maybe that friend who talks about becoming a millionaire, starting a business, traveling the world, yet somehow still asks, "Bro, can you spot me until payday?" Or the guy who says, "Marriage? Nah, I'm not ready." 5 years later, he's still saying, "I'm just not ready yet." Or someone who quits every job after 3 months because my boss just doesn't get me. Funny how somehow every boss is the problem, every workplace is toxic, every opportunity is beneath them. But somehow they're never the common denominator. Or maybe you've seen the guy who buys the newest iPhone the day it launches, the latest sneakers, the newest PlayStation, yet his electricity bill is overdue. His priorities grew up, just not him. Or the person who treats every small inconvenience like it's the end of the world. The Wi-Fi stops working for 5 minutes, and suddenly it's a national emergency. One tiny criticism, and they're offended for a week. One difficult conversation, and they'd rather disappear than deal with it. Or maybe it's the guy who loves calling himself an alpha, posts motivational quotes every morning, talks endlessly about discipline, success, grinding, and becoming unstoppable. But ask him to wash his own dishes, reply to an important email, or show up on time, and suddenly he's got every excuse in the world. And here's my favorite one. The guy who's convinced he's destined for something extraordinary, but somehow ordinary responsibilities are beneath him. Cleaning his room, boring. Doing taxes, later. Keeping promises, too much pressure. But becoming the next Elon Musk? Absolutely. Look, it's easy to laugh at these people, until you realize a tiny version of that person exists inside almost all of us. Because here's what most people don't realize. Being a man-child isn't about playing video games, watching anime, collecting Lego, or refusing to wear formal clothes. It's much deeper than that. It's what happens when your body grows into an adult, but a part of your mind quietly refuses to grow up. And trust me, this is where it gets really interesting. Now, before you start thinking, "Oh, this is just about lazy people," not even close. In fact, that's one of the biggest myths about Peter Pan syndrome. Because many man-children aren't lazy at all. They're incredibly creative. They're full of ideas. They're charismatic. Some are even the funniest person in every room. They're the kind of people who can spend 10 hours learning every detail about a business they'll never start, watch motivational videos every single morning, or create the perfect plan for changing their life without ever taking the first uncomfortable step. Look, effort isn't the problem. Direction is. Here's what most people don't realize. The real fear isn't responsibility. It's what responsibility reveals. Because the moment you commit to something, a career, a relationship, a business, or even becoming healthier, you can no longer hide behind your potential. Suddenly, your actions become visible. Your weaknesses become visible. Your excuses become visible. And that's terrifying. So instead, your brain invents a much safer strategy. Stay almost ready, almost successful, almost financially stable, almost committed, almost starting. Because as long as you're almost, you never have to find out what happens if you give everything you've got and still fail. Carl Jung had a fascinating name for this. He called it the Puer Aeternus, Latin for the eternal boy. Not because the person acts childish all the time, but because deep inside, they keep waiting for life to begin. They believe, one day I'll become the person I'm supposed to be. One day I'll finally get serious. One day I'll stop wasting time. One day I'll become disciplined. One day I'll have confidence. One day. The problem is, life doesn't begin on one day. Life quietly disappears while you're waiting for it. And here's something fascinating. According to psychologist Dr. Kiley, who popularized the term Peter Pan syndrome, many adults trapped in this pattern don't actually fear adulthood itself. They fear losing the comfort of endless possibilities. Think about it like standing in front of a restaurant with a 50-page menu. At first, having unlimited choices feels exciting. But eventually, you spend so much time trying to choose the perfect meal that everyone else has already finished eating. That's exactly what happens in life. Some people become so obsessed with keeping every option open, they never fully choose anything. No career, no relationship, no purpose. Because choosing one path means giving up hundreds of others. And their brain interprets that as losing freedom. But here's the irony. The person who refuses to commit because they want complete freedom usually ends up with the least freedom of all. Financially dependent, emotionally dependent, still waiting for someone else to rescue them from a life they never built. And the strangest part? Most of them don't even realize they're doing it, because the brain is incredibly good at disguising fear as freedom. And once you see that illusion, you'll start noticing it everywhere, because this is where it gets really interesting. How does someone become like this in the first place? Was it bad parenting, too much comfort, too much praise? Or is your brain simply running a survival program you never knew existed? Let's find out. Hey, my name is Ponder, and I ponder way too much. If you're someone who thinks future you will magically become more disciplined, healthier, and somehow wake up excited to pay bills, make sure to hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps you out. Because today, we're talking about one of the strangest psychological traps your brain can fall into, the man-child, or as psychology often calls it, Peter Pan syndrome. So, where does this actually begin? Because let's be honest, nobody wakes up at 35 years old and decides, you know what? I'd love to avoid responsibility for the rest of my life. Something happened long before that. And surprisingly, it often starts with something that seems completely harmless. Being told, you're so smart, you're gifted, you're special. Now don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with encouraging kids. The problem is what they're praised for. Imagine two children. The first one hears, I'm proud of you because you kept trying. The second one hears, you're a genius. Both sound positive, but psychologically, they create two completely different adults. The first child learns, my value comes from effort. The second child quietly starts believing, my value comes from already being exceptional. That tiny difference changes everything, because here's what happens when those children grow up. The first child isn't afraid of looking stupid. Making mistakes is just part of learning. But the second child, every mistake feels like evidence that maybe they were never special to begin with. And that's terrifying. So what does the brain do? It avoids situations where that belief could be challenged, not consciously, subconsciously. Instead of applying for the dream job, I'll wait until my resume is perfect. Instead of asking someone out, maybe after I lose some weight. Instead of launching the business, I'm still researching. Sound familiar? Here's the thing. Perfectionism is often just fear wearing expensive clothes. It looks productive. It feels intelligent. But underneath, it's simply another way of avoiding judgment. This is why some of the smartest people you know never seem to move forward, not because they lack ability, because they're protecting an identity that says, if I never truly try, I never have to discover my limits. And here's what most people don't realize. The man-child doesn't fear failure. He fears feeling ordinary, because ordinary people have to learn. Ordinary people have to struggle. Ordinary people have to start at the bottom. But if you've spent your whole life believing you're destined for something extraordinary, starting at the bottom feels like an insult. So instead, you wait for motivation, for confidence, for the perfect opportunity, for the perfect timing, for the version of yourself that somehow already knows what they're doing. And that person never arrives. Because confidence isn't something you find. It's something you accidentally build while doing things you're bad at. This is where it gets really interesting. Research by psychologist Carl Dweck on fixed versus growth mindsets found that people who tie their identity to being naturally talented are far more likely to avoid difficult challenges that might expose weaknesses. In contrast, people who believe abilities grow through effort are much more willing to fail, learn, and improve. Think about that. The child who was constantly called gifted can actually become more afraid of failure than the child who was simply taught to keep trying. That's one of the strangest glitches in the human brain. The compliments that were supposed to build confidence sometimes build a prison instead. But childhood is only part of the story, because millions of people had wonderful childhoods and still became emotionally stuck, which means there's another force quietly feeding the man-child every single day, one that's sitting in your pocket, buzzing every few minutes, and convincing your brain that escaping reality feels better than building it. And honestly, modern life has become the perfect playground for the man-child. Let's talk about why. So, if Peter Pan syndrome begins in childhood, why does it seem like we're seeing more of it today than ever before? Simple. Because modern life rewards you for avoiding discomfort. Think about it. Feeling lonely? Open Instagram. Feeling stressed? Watch Netflix. Feeling bored? Scroll TikTok. Feeling anxious? Play one more game. Feeling rejected? Distract yourself until you forget. Look, there's nothing wrong with any of those things. The problem isn't entertainment. The problem is using entertainment as emotional anesthesia. Imagine breaking your leg, and instead of going to the hospital, you just keep taking painkillers. The pain disappears, but the broken bone stays exactly where it is. That's what distraction does. It doesn't solve your problems. It simply delays meeting them. And here's what most people don't realize. Your brain doesn't actually care whether your achievements are real or virtual. It only cares about the feeling. Beat a difficult boss in a video game, and your brain rewards you. Get hundreds of likes on a photo, another reward. Unlock another achievement, another reward. Another level, another badge, another streak. Meanwhile, real life is asking you to do something much less exciting. Pay your bills, wake up early, have an uncomfortable conversation. Stick with one career long enough to become good at it. The problem? Those things don't give instant rewards. They give delayed rewards. And unfortunately, your brain absolutely loves the instant ones. According to Dr. Anna Lemke, psychiatrist and author of Dopamine Nation, our brains are increasingly surrounded by highly stimulating activities that provide quick dopamine hits, making ordinary, effortful tasks feel less satisfying by comparison. In other words, the more your brain gets used to constant stimulation, the harder it becomes to enjoy normal life. Suddenly, reading 10 pages of a book feels exhausting. Cooking dinner feels boring. Cleaning your room feels unbearable. Not because those things became harder, because your brain's expectation for stimulation became ridiculously high. And this creates the perfect environment for the man-child. Because adulthood is mostly built on boring things. Nobody posts on Instagram. Guys, I filed my taxes today. Nobody makes a highlight reel of consistently showing up for work. Nobody gets millions of views for folding laundry every Sunday. But here's the funny part. Those boring habits are exactly what build extraordinary lives. The people you admire, the ones who seem disciplined, successful, reliable, they're usually not addicted to excitement. They're addicted to consistency. Now, you might be thinking, okay, Ponder, but I just enjoy having fun. Isn't life supposed to be enjoyed? Absolutely. Life should be enjoyed. But enjoyment and escape aren't the same thing. There's a huge difference between playing games because you've finished your responsibilities and playing games because you're hiding from them. One gives you recovery, the other gives you relief. Recovery makes you stronger. Relief keeps you dependent. Look, ask yourself one uncomfortable question. If someone secretly removed your phone, your gaming console, your streaming apps, and social media for 1 week, would you finally start building the life you've been talking about? Or would you have no idea what to do with yourself? Because that answer reveals something important. Sometimes, we're not addicted to our phones. We're addicted to not having to sit alone with our own thoughts. And once you realize that, you start seeing another hidden pattern. One that's even more dangerous than procrastination. Because eventually, the man-child doesn't just avoid responsibilities. He starts avoiding relationships too. And that's where the real damage begins. So far, we've talked about careers, motivation, comfort, and avoiding responsibility. But here's where Peter Pan syndrome becomes truly destructive. It doesn't just steal your potential. It slowly destroys your relationships. Because here's the thing. Every healthy relationship asks the same question. Can I depend on you? Not, do you love me? Not, do you buy me expensive gifts? Not even, do we have chemistry? Just one simple question. Can I count on you? Look, it's easy to be romantic during the honeymoon phase. It's easy to promise forever. It's easy to say, I'd do anything for you. But then, real life shows up. Bills, stress, compromise, sacrifice. And suddenly, the man-child starts feeling trapped. He starts saying things like, I just need more space. I don't want to lose myself. I'm not ready for this kind of commitment. Now, don't misunderstand me. Wanting space is healthy. Not rushing into marriage is healthy. Taking time before making a life-changing decision is healthy. Avoiding commitment because responsibility scares you, that's something completely different. Because here's what most people don't realize. The man-child doesn't actually fear commitment. He fears losing the fantasy that something better might always be waiting. Maybe there's a better job, a better city, a better girlfriend, a better opportunity, a better version of life. So instead of appreciating what's real, he keeps chasing what's possible. It's like standing in front of Netflix for an hour, scrolling through hundreds of movies, only to end up watching nothing. Too many options. Become another way of making no decision at all. And life doesn't reward endless options. It rewards commitment. Here's another strange pattern. Whenever something goes wrong, the man-child almost always finds someone else to blame. The economy, his parents, his boss, his ex, society, bad luck. Now, are those things real? Of course. Life isn't fair. Some people absolutely start with bigger disadvantages. But here's the dangerous part. The moment you believe everything is someone else's fault, you also believe someone else has to fix it. And that's one of the fastest ways to give away control over your own life. Psychologists call this having an external locus of control, the belief that your life is mostly shaped by outside forces rather than your own choices. Research has consistently found that people with a stronger internal locus of control are generally more resilient, more persistent, and more likely to take action when life gets difficult. Think about that. The difference isn't who has the easier life. It's who believes, what can I do next? Instead of, why is this happening to me? Because adulthood begins the moment you stop asking, whose fault is this? And start asking, what's my responsibility now? That's not always comfortable, but it's incredibly powerful. Because responsibility has a funny reputation. People think it's heavy, restrictive, stressful. But in reality, responsibility is freedom. The ability to pay your own bills is freedom. The ability to control your emotions is freedom. The ability to keep your promises is freedom. The ability to rely on yourself is freedom. Ironically, the people who spend their lives chasing freedom from responsibility usually become dependent on everyone else. And that's the biggest psychological trap of all. The man-child thinks responsibility takes his freedom away, when in reality, it's the only thing that can actually give it back. So, if you've seen a little bit of yourself in today's video, don't panic. Seriously. This isn't about guilt, it's about awareness, because you can't change a pattern until you can finally see it. And once you do, everything changes. So, how do you actually grow out of the man-child? Let's make it practical. So, if you've recognized a little bit of yourself today, don't close the video, because here's the mistake most people make. They hear something like this, feel guilty for 5 minutes, promise themselves they'll change, and then wake up tomorrow, exactly the same. Look, guilt doesn't make you mature. Responsibility does. And becoming a man has surprisingly little to do with age. It has everything to do with what you repeatedly choose to do when nobody is watching. So, how do you actually stop being a man-child? Let's start with the first step. Step 1. Stop waiting to feel ready. Here's something I wish more people understood. Adults don't act because they feel ready. They act because reality doesn't wait. The man-child keeps asking, what if I'm not ready? A mature person asks, what's the next responsibility in front of me? There's a huge difference, because readiness is usually an emotion. Responsibility is a decision, and emotions are terrible managers. If your emotions controlled brushing your teeth, you'd probably skip that too. Yet, somehow, we let emotions decide our careers, our finances, our health, our relationships. Look, stop negotiating with yourself. The more you negotiate, the more your brain learns. That responsibility is optional. Step 2. Build an identity you can respect. Here's what most people don't realize. You don't become mature by trying to feel mature. You become mature by collecting evidence. Think about it. Every promise you break to yourself, your brain notices. I'll wake up at 7. You don't. I'll start the gym Monday. You don't. I'll save money this month. You don't. Eventually, your own brain stops believing you. Imagine having a friend who broke every promise they ever made. Would you trust them? Probably not. Then why would your brain trust you? Self-confidence isn't built by affirmations. It's built by keeping small promises until your brain says, maybe I actually am reliable. That's how identity changes. Not overnight, but one decision at a time. Step 3. Do the boring things exceptionally well. This might be the most important lesson in the entire video. The man-child wants an extraordinary life without becoming the kind of person who can handle ordinary responsibilities. He wants financial freedom without budgeting, a healthy relationship without difficult conversations, a successful business without years of boring work. But reality has one simple rule. Extraordinary lives are built on ordinary habits. Cleaning your room, showing up on time, replying to emails, keeping your word, paying bills before buying gadgets. None of these feel exciting, but every one of them tells your brain, I'm becoming someone people can depend on. And strangely enough, that's what confidence actually feels like. Not being fearless, being dependable. Step 4. Stop chasing freedom. Start earning it. This is probably the biggest lie the man-child believes. If I avoid responsibility, I'll stay free. No, you stay dependent. Real freedom isn't doing whatever you want. Real freedom is being capable enough that your life doesn't fall apart without someone rescuing you. The freedom to pay your own bills. The freedom to regulate your emotions. The freedom to keep your promises. The freedom to stand on your own feet. That's adulthood. And honestly, that's a freedom nobody can take away. Because here's the beautiful irony. The responsibilities you keep avoiding today might actually be the exact things that set you free tomorrow. And that's why growing up isn't about becoming less alive. It's about becoming someone who can finally build the life they've spent years imagining. So, let me ask you one final question. When does a boy actually become a man? Is it when he turns 18, 21, 30, gets married, becomes a father, makes his first million? No, because you've probably met people in their 50s who still behave like children the moment life becomes uncomfortable. And you've probably met 22-year-olds who carry themselves with incredible maturity. So, what's the difference? Here's the thing. Growing up isn't an event. It's a decision. It's the moment you stop asking, what does life owe me? And start asking, what does this moment require from me? Because that's what responsibility really is. Not a punishment, not a burden, a response to reality. And here's what most people don't realize. The man-child doesn't ruin his life with one terrible decision. He ruins it with 1,000 tiny escapes. One more excuse, one more delay, one more promise to start tomorrow, one more responsibility handed to someone else. Individually, they seem harmless. Together, they become a life. Imagine two men standing at the bottom of a mountain. The first one says, I'll climb when I feel confident. The second one says, I'm terrified, but I'm taking the first step anyway. Who do you think is standing at the top? Confidence doesn't create action. Action creates confidence. That's the glitch. We've been waiting for the wrong thing all along. And maybe that's why so many people stay stuck. They're waiting to become a different person before they start acting differently. When in reality, you become a different person by acting differently. Not once, repeatedly. Carl Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Think about that. Maybe this whole time, you've been calling it bad luck, bad timing, bad circumstances, when really, it was an unconscious pattern quietly running your life. But today, you've seen it. You've given it a name. The man-child. And once you can name a pattern, you can challenge it. So here's your challenge. Not next Monday, not next month. Today, choose one responsibility you've been avoiding. Maybe it's making that phone call, cleaning your room, apologizing to someone, sending your resume, starting the project, paying off that bill, having the difficult conversation. I don't care how small it is. Just stop negotiating with yourself and do it. Because every time you choose responsibility over avoidance, you're casting a vote for the person you're becoming. One vote won't change your life, but thousands of them will. And one day, without even realizing it, you'll wake up and notice something strange. You no longer need motivation to do the right thing. You simply became the kind of person who does. That's when you know the man-child is gone. If this video made you stop and reflect, even for a minute, hit the like button. And if you're someone who's curious about why we think the way we do, why we sabotage ourselves, and how to become mentally stronger, make sure to subscribe. Because every week, we'll decode another psychological glitch hiding in plain sight. And go beyond every answer until next time. I'm Ponder, and I'll keep pondering. So, we can keep growing. I'll see you in the next one.